Hey everyone, it's your internet pal Alan, and we're about to watch my Macintosh LC III repair video. But you might notice that it's not March anymore. Or is it? Maybe we could just pretend it's 8 days in the past and it's March 31st, in which case it's totally fine to watch this video. Or we could just say I'm 11 months early. I'm not sure, dealer's choice on this. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this video as much as I did making it. Apple II forever, stay foolish. Thanks for watching. When we last saw this old Mac LC3, it had a busted monitor and won't boot with a flashing disk icon. Hello everyone, I'm Alan Gracia, and this time, for our Macintosh 2023 Spectacular, let's see if we can get this old Mac from 1993 up and running again. All right, so we cleared the table. We have the LC3 up on the desk here. And I've gone ahead and removed the lid. Just be careful of brittle plastics. They are quite easy to break the tabs and clips on these things. So we have the original Quantum Pro Drive ELS. It's an 80 gig Apple branded version of the Quantum hard drive in here. And this guy is a goner, right? It's dead. We powered it up. And you can just hear the heads grinding against the metal platter. So there is really no hope for restoring this Quantum drive. But that's okay because I have here is a V1 BlueSCSI. So this is the BlueSCSI. It's mounted on a little plastic mounting bracket. And in here I've gone ahead and pre-prepared a version on this little SD card here of macOS 7.6, which we can go ahead and boot this machine up. It is the version of macOS that this machine would have run back in the day. So what we need to do now is to get this hard drive out of the chassis and then replace it with the BlueSCSI. So let's go ahead and do that now. Now again, we're dealing with brittle plastics. We have 2 clips here and 2 on the opposite side. They are clipped onto the metal carrier that the hard drive is in. So we're going to very carefully kind of pry that out and hopefully we don't break anything. All right, we got the left side free. Let's see if we can do the same on the right. Again, carefully, gently, kind of playing with these. I keep getting 3 of the clips free and then the 4th one usually just pops back in. Here we go. Careful. Lift these out. Oh. There we go. Whew. All right. So we have the 4 posts intact and the drive on its carrier. Go ahead and pull the power cable out. Now it's just a matter of getting some screws out. And then we can load the BlueSCSI into the carrier. All right, so here is the Quantum drive that was in the computer. Apparently we have labels falling off the Quantum drive. What does this say here? Looks like it's just possibly a serial number and a revision number. Not really sure what that's for. But here we have, oh, it was on the back of the SCSI connector here. So we can see the circuit board, like I said. The drive has got the Apple firmware on it, the EEPROM. We see copyright 1992 with the Apple logo. And we also see this is an 80 gig drive because it's got the Apple sticker here as well. So while the drive looks like it's in great condition, we do know that there is a problem with the heads. So we'll just set that aside. And now we'll take the BlueSCSI and we'll mount it inside the bracket. So taking a look here, let's see, probably get that to ride maybe out there. I don't think we can go back any farther than that. So yeah, we'll put it in right here on the carrier about there. That should give us enough clearance with the SCSI cable back here and with the power adapter to reach the power input on the motherboard. All right, so we have the BlueSCSI mounted onto the caddy. Put the caddy back into the LC3. Let's see here. So we got a little cable management going on here. Plug in this Molex adapter. We'll send the SCSI cable over the top. And the SCSI cable is easy to put in because it's notched. It only goes in one way. And then we'll bring this Molex connector, I think this other power end, and plug it in like that. And then we'll push in the plate for the hard drive. Again, being careful not to damage any of the clips because that would be bad. Okay. All right, so with the SCSI cable reconnected and the power connected, and we have the SD card in the BlueSCSI, and the BlueSCSI is configured. Next thing we'll do is we'll get the monitor. We'll put it up here on the desk with the keyboard and the mouse, and let's see if we can get this machine to boot. Okay, just to quickly recap, we have the LC3 here on the table with the BlueSCSI replacing the hard drive. The LC monitor is powered up and ready to go. Now we'll turn on the Mac and see what happens. Okay, we've got a power light on the BlueSCSI. I have the speaker disconnected at the moment so I don't hear the chime. Fans are running. Happy Mac, and there it goes, Mac OS. Takes a second to get going there, but after that first extension, it's booting up pretty quickly again. Still much faster than the spinning hard drive would have been. And here comes the desktop. And we see the two disk drives that I had mounted in that image, Macintosh HD, and the BlueSCSI tools image, which has a bunch of useful tools to get going with a BlueSCSI, or actually any machine that's running an emulated hard disk. So we see a lot of tools here. And what do we got about this computer? So we have Macintosh running system software 761. Looks like we have a 12 megabyte memory card here, RAM card. And we're using about 3.4 megs to get the Mac OS booted up. So far, give that a thumbs up on a successful boot with a BlueSCSI version 1.1. And I think before I shut the Mac down, I'm going to go ahead and press my luck. I have an 800K floppy drive here, so low density disk. This Mac should have a SuperDrive in it, so 1.44 megabyte floppy disk drive, which is capable of reading obviously 1.4 megabyte floppy drives, 800K floppy drives, and can even read the original Macintosh 400K floppy drives. So let's go ahead and see what happens when we put this disk in and whether or not the disk drive works. Yeah, I think this drive is going to have to get serviced. I can't even push the disk in. Yeah, those gears are in pretty bad shape. So I'm going to go ahead and shut down the Mac, and then we'll service the floppy drive. All right, we've got everything off the desk again. Workspace is nice and clear. And the next order of business is to get this floppy drive out of the LC3 chassis so we can take it apart and service it. And that's going to entail re-greasing, re-lubing, cleaning out all the dust and gunk and everything else we need to do, and get this drive working again. So let's see here. We're going to carefully, again, we've got more of my favorite plastic clips. So gently pry those away. Actually, looking at this now, it does appear that there are a couple screws on either side of the floppy drive holding the whole drive assembly inside the chassis. So I'm going to go ahead and see if we can get those out of there. Okay, we got some Phillips head screws right there that are on either side of the drive, so we'll get those out of there. And it's looking like I'm going to have to go ahead and pull out the hard drive tray to get at the screw that's on the other side. So I'm going to go off camera and do that, and I'll be right back. And just while I'm going ahead and taking this drive, I've gone ahead and flipped the hard drive cage upside down with a caddy, so it's up against the circuit board at the moment. And you can see I've got the extension on the screwdriver, and we're trying to get out the screw that's right back here. It is kind of tight. It hasn't obviously been unscrewed in a couple decades, crazy that sounds. So I've got the extender on there, and we'll just be able to pull that out. The real issue is getting between these two clips, the clip that holds the hard drive bay in and the post that keeps it in its in the area here where the hard drive goes, and we just got to get that screw out of there. So do be careful while you're unscrewing that, but yeah. All right, with both of those screws out, the floppy drive goes ahead and just lifts right out of the chassis here. There's a little ribbon cable, so we'll go ahead and gently disconnect that from the motherboard, and that will release the floppy drive from the case. So let's get to taking this apart and re-lubing and greasing it. And we're back. It's been several days since the first half of this video was recorded. Now we're getting back into it. So let's take a quick moment to just recap where we are and what has happened with this floppy drive since you last saw this Mac. So a couple things going on. I did disassemble and fully refurbish and service this floppy drive. It is just sort of sitting here on the chassis. It's plugged in but not mounted into the case yet. The good news is with this Mac design, the shield that's around the hard drive or the floppy drive and the fan being behind the floppy means there's not a lot of air moving through the front of the unit like the Macintosh SE that I serviced last year, where these floppy drives were just full of lots and lots of dust. With this particular drive, the biggest problem was all of the grease and lubricant had turned into this nice thick goo, which required lots of IPA alcohol and scraping with a spudger to get all that stuff, debris off of the surfaces for the inject. As we go ahead and insert the floppy disk, those metal plates inside slide around to drop the disk down to the head. All of that was gummed up, and as you saw in that first half of this video, the disk wouldn't even drop into place. It would just kind of get stuck here. Well, now that's all fixed. A couple other things going on here. I did rearrange the BlueSCSI that's on the plate for this hard drive. This hard drive, as you remember, was a goner. I've got some extra screws here, and I did fish out a piece of brittle plastic that was floating around in there. I don't think I broke it, but I don't know. So those just pieces are here in case I ever need them again. And the BlueSCSI is being repositioned on this hard drive caddy so that it can slide back a little farther and there's not so much tension on the SCSI cable. A couple other things just to keep in mind. If you are servicing an LC3 or an LC that's got a similar form factor, if you're doing the same thing I'm doing, just watch out for the speaker cable. If you flip the drive caddy around, it could get trapped underneath, so just make sure you pull that out, and then we'll do some cable management. We'll send the power cables back underneath the SCSI ribbon cable as it mounts inside the chassis. So that's who we are. Let's get this stuff reconnected, and then let's boot up the Mac and test out that floppy drive, shall we? And with the Mac booted up, let's go ahead and take our 800K floppy and put it into the SuperDrive. Let's see what we got. Drops in nice and smooth. We get the disk. This happens to be installed disk 1. And it reads it. Can I launch the installer? Let's see. It's making all sorts of good noises. That's great. For all you youngsters who are watching, floppy disks took forever to load. Yeah, I'd say that that's a good floppy test. It's able to read the disk. The disk is able to slide into the mechanism now with no problem, and we've gone ahead and we're able to launch the FileMaker Pro 2.0 installer. Excellent. We're going to go ahead and quit out, and then we'll put our disk away, and we'll go for the eject. Nice. With the floppy drive serviced and the hard drive replaced, that BlueSCSI, there is one other thing that I want to, it's actually two other things that I want to do with this Mac. But the first has to deal with the expansion card that's sitting in the back. That is an Apple IIe card. And just like the name implies, it is my beloved Apple IIe computer condensed down into a single card that rides inside the Mac LC chassis. There's a couple other versions of the Mac LC, and I believe the Performa 500 that can also use this model. But this one came preloaded with this card, so that was a great find. And so this is for the educational market, if you will. The educational market had a large investment in Apple II hardware, floppy drives, the software catalog, and to help customers, those educational market customers, move from the Apple II series to the Macintosh series, the low-cost color platform, like this LC3 here, was a way to do that. And that Apple IIe card in the back was part of the bridge that helped that happen. Now, the cool thing about this card is not only is it condensing the Apple IIe into a single card, it draws heavily on the technology that was in the Apple IIGS, and the Apple IIGS team helped design this card. So where the Apple IIGS had that Mega 2 chip, which was the emulator that made the Apple IIGS backward compatible with the Apple II family, this card has the Gemini chip in it, which does basically the same thing. So that is the Apple IIe, all the way condensed down to a single card. Now, usually off the back, there is a special Y cable that lets you attach the modern 5¼ floppy drive or the older Disk 2 style floppy drive. And what typically would happen is many of those cables would get lost as LCs were broken down from school, they were disconnected from their peripherals, the cables would get lost to the sands of time. But thankfully, Joe at Joe's Computer Museum has made the Y cable. It comes in 2 flavors. By the way, this is not a paid promotion or anything like that. I did buy these from Joe in preparation for this video. And what this does is you plug either one of these boards in the back of the LC, the Apple IIe card, and then you can either use the older Disk 2 style connector for the ribbon cable. It comes off the Disk 2 drive, and then you have a serial port or a game port hanging off the back, and then this just plugs into the back of the LC3's Apple IIe card. Or you have something very similar here, but you use the more modern, the 5¼ floppy drive, which uses a regular cable adapter, just like you would have the monitor adapter or something like that off of the LC3. And you also have that game port adapter. So what Joe has done with this board is do a hardware hack for the cables that get lost. So let's go ahead and connect one of these up. I'll use the 5¼ version, so we'll use this adapter of the Y cable, and then we'll load up some software on the Mac LC3 and see if we can get this card running. And with things shuffled around the desk, we have the Mac LC3 that's booted up with the Apple IIe card installed. Off the back of the card is the JCM1.com Y cable adapter. So it's the hardware solution to replace that physical cable that may have become lost. And then off the back of that adapter is a pin connector for the Apple 5.25-inch floppy drive. So with the Mac plugged in and powered on, the card's in there, the adapter's off the back of the card, the cable going from the card to the floppy drive, it is now time to go back to the Mac, and we'll install the software to allow us to run the Apple IIe card. So, what have we got? So we'll go here, Macintosh hard drive. I've already copied the software installers onto the Mac. The Apple IIe card. Go ahead and use the disk image. Move! There's Claris, the cow dog. Okay, so here's the installer disk. And having already read the directions, we'll go ahead and run the installer. Okay, installation of Macintosh HD was successful. So go ahead and click Quit. Macintosh desktop reloads. Now on Macintosh HD, we should have a new program. We have a couple extra files kicking around here. Yeah, so here are the files necessary to get the Apple IIe card running. We have Apple IIe startup, the ProDOS driver, and the basic.system driver. So we'll go ahead and start up the Apple IIe card. Here we go, fingers crossed. To use the Apple IIe card, you must turn 32-bit addressing off in the memory control panel. Whoops. Let's go to the memory control panel. All right, jump cut time. As you saw there was no 32-bit addressing in the memory control panel, and that's because Mac OS 7.6 and 7.6.1, which I was running on the Macintosh LC III, doesn't support 24-bit addressing mode. Whoops. So I've gone ahead and cooked up a new BlueSCSI SD image for Macintosh 7.5.3 revision 2, which is not Mac OS 7.6. So now, if we go back to the memory control panel, this time we'll have the option for 32-bit addressing, and that is turned off. So let's go ahead and try to launch Apple IIe mode again. Yeah, it's looking much better. Well, what do we have here? That seems to be an Apple IIe command prompt. And as that screen flipped, I'm sure you heard the Apple II 5.25-inch disk drive when it's a seek mode. So let's see what happens if we put a floppy disk in there and we reboot the Mac. Well, in this case, reboot the Apple IIe. And here we have a original diskware Apple II DOS 3.3 system disk. It is 5.25-inch floppy disk. I do have a piece of tape there that makes it write protected, so the drive cannot be written back to. Go ahead and load it up. Let's try a PR number 6, which should reboot the Apple II. Oops. Remember, this is Apple II. Everything's got to be caps. PR number 6. Drive is seeking. There we go. there is the Apple II operating system, DOS 3.3, running on a Mac LC3 with its Apple IIe compatibility card. And we can also go into the control panel mode. Let's try, it was Control Apple Escape. That brings us back to the Macintosh where we can go ahead and configure the Apple IIe card. So let's see what we've got going on here. We have the general control panels. We can see we can run the Mac in Apple IIe mode in either the normal mode, or we can speed that up a little bit into fast mode. Let's see if we can get the screen. There we go. Do a little adjustment there. That way we can actually read the screen. We have the regular Apple IIe beep sound because, you know, it's an Apple IIe. We have the display, normal text, color, monochrome, delete. So all these are all sort of the tweaks that you can do that control the Apple IIe. Okay, now that we know we can get the Apple II to boot up, let's try something a little else. Let's try an old copy of the Apple Writer 1.1 text editor, right? The word processing for Apple II. And there we go. Let's try loading something from disk. I'm not sure what's on this disk, if there's anything. Enter file name. I don't know. Test. File not found. Okay. Well, let's just do edit file in memory. That doesn't look so great. So clearly I don't know what I'm doing with this software, so let's leave that alone. We'll go ahead and maybe we'll try something else. How about mouse paint? That seems safe enough. And let's just test out the Apple IIe mouse mode. So let's try that next. And we'll use M. See a little artifacting from the Macintosh side of things. And there you go. There is mouse paint in all its wonderful 8-bit glory. Right down to the artifacting on the text and everything. Mouse paint info. Mouse paint 1.0, copyright 1984, Apple Computer Inc. by Bill Budge, based on Mac Paint by Bill Atkinson. So we see here the Apple II version of the Paint program, which is a derivative of Mac Paint from the 1984 Macintosh. Okay, let's go ahead and get out of here because I am not going to attempt to even try to draw a square because that could be pretty painful. So go ahead and exit mouse paint. And let's go ahead and exit Apple IIe mode. Yes, we will go ahead and quit. So that was a quick demo of the Apple IIe card running inside the Macintosh LC III. And having taken a look at this Apple IIe card for the Macintosh LC III series, there's one more thing that I'd like to do to this Mac, which is to go ahead and install the Motorola FPU, the floating point processor. This is a math coprocessor card, or chip. See if we get it to focus. There it is. The Macintosh math coprocessor, or the Motorola chip, that goes right into this socket. This socket was left empty as part of the low-cost color computer by leaving stuff out of it. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to install this chip, and we're going to see if we can speed up this, this Mac a little bit. So let's try that now. So the first thing you need to know about these kinds of chips is that they are notched, and that there is a visual indicator that helps point out where the chip gets installed. And on this particular LC3 motherboard, that indicator is this corner of the socket. So you see the other corners are sort of squared off, and this one's got a little notch to it, a little Battlestar Galactica, the corners chopped off kind of thing. And then on the system board itself, there's a little white dot here, and that indicates this is the side where pin 1 goes. Now taking a look at this math coprocessor, the sides are square except for this one right here. There is a little notch that's knocked out of it, just like we see on the notch here on the board. And then if you look ever so closely at the chip, there is an indent in the package, right, in the IC package, and that indent, that little dot, is the dot that goes along with the dot here on the motherboard. So we'll take the chip and we'll line up the two dots, get it all straightened out. Now there's little ridges on here that the feet connect into, so it just only goes in one way, so I like to line it up. It looks like everything is good to go, and we'll just push it in. There we go. That math coprocessor is now mated inside this LC3 motherboard. Let's take a look at Macbench 4 running on the LC3. So we take a look at system info, but the system model we see is an LC3. The processor is a 68030, looking good so far. And we see down here the FPU type, the floating point unit. There's no FPU coprocessor built in, so that is where we are. So we'll set our test to LC3, CPU, and FPU. Go ahead and run the test. Let's see what we get. And with the CPU, FPU, and disk test complete, we can see here that the compared to the 6100, the LC3 is an abysmal, just 10% of the power of the LC3. And obviously the floating point here is 0 because this Mac has no floating point coprocessor. But it's interesting to see the BlueSCSI is coming in at 66%. So this is a bit of a cheat because it is obviously solid state disk drive using that SD card, so there's no spinning platters or anything like that. So it's interesting to see that this does make it all the way up to 66%. Okay, we have the LC3 booted up, running Macbench 4 with the math coprocessor chip installed. The Apple IIe card's back installed, it's buttoned up, and let's just take a look at system info. Here it is, and now we see that the FPU type, the math coprocessor, is a Motorola 68882 FPU math coprocessor, along with the built-in CPU, the Motorola 68030. All right, so now we'll load up our LC3 tests. And with the second round of Macbench testing complete, we'll compare the pre-FPU to the current FPU test scores, and let's see what we have here. So on the processor side of things, we see the current system, which has the FPU, it's 100% versus 99% with a score of 10 to 10. Okay, that's pretty much a wash. On the floating point test, obviously this is the chip we just added. With the chip installed, we got 100%. Versus 20% FPU performance previously without the chip. So obviously we got a pretty decent boost there relative to what we had before. And then the disk test, remember this is the BlueSCSI version 1 card that's installed here. we see 75 versus 66. So we did get a slight performance boost with that FPU installed. So that's kind of neat. So overall, these are the scores that we have. Not a huge difference with that FPU installed as far as the test is concerned. In practical use, if we were doing some number crunching in, say, Excel, or perhaps if we were doing some photo editing in a version of Photoshop or something like that, something that can take advantage of the FPU, we might see a little bit more performance improvement over a system without the FPU installed. But let's face it, at the end of the day, this is an LC series machine, right? And that LC is low-cost color. This computer is compromised in other ways besides having missed that chip. So overall, it's a neat little project to do. I'm glad I installed that chip. Let's move on and we'll wrap this up. Getting this old Mac LC3 up and running again was way more work than I was bargaining for. From having to repair that monitor housing, as seen in my last video, to getting not one but two versions of classic Mac OS up and running, servicing that gummed up floppy drive, and getting the LC card working, with finally moving on to installing and testing that Motorola Mathco processor chip. But there's still way more work that has to be done, because this LC3's system board is showing signs that point to leaky capacitors, and they will definitely need to be replaced later this year after I've had a chance to practice some soldering skills. But for now, I'm glad I was able to save this 30-year-old Mac, and having a working Apple IIe card means that just like this LC3's older cousin, I'll have Apple II forever.